and all these great things that are happening right now. Because reading is political, just an FYI, just in case you didn't know. So our guest today is Francesca, as always. She's like a returning guest. She's like a second co-host of this podcast. And she's our go-to expert for all things fantasy, paranormal, urban fantasy, and whatnot. So, Francesca, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm always excited to be here.
Awesome. So, talk to us about urban fantasy because it's a little bit different than high fantasy and paranormal and all of those different things. But urban fantasy, I think, is a great intro to fantasy because it's not as intimidating as other fantasy. There's not a lot of new language sometimes, so it's kind of like interesting.
Yeah, I think it's such a great entry point. It's actually probably one of my original favorite genres. That's what I cut my teeth in with when I was in high school, like the true classics of like Anne Rice and like that kind of stuff. And I think the easy way that people can be introduced to it is because it is set in a real world. So it's always set in a place that like you already kind of know the rules. The only thing that's different is that there is a paranormal world kind of blended into the normal world that we already know. So maybe sometimes can be post-apocalyptic. So, something happened, end of the world, whatever. And now the paranormals are out, or maybe the paranormals are not out. And there's all these like a lot of politics usually involved to it and like wars between different factions and things like that. So there's a lot of really interesting series. A lot of them are finished series. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on today is some of the must-read paranormal urban fantasy series that are already completed. So you could actually like binge through the whole series because those are really satisfying. Especially when I was really reading urban fantasy at the beginning, I would pick up one series and just read through. And the reason why you have to do that is because you don't have a resolution in a book.
Yeah.
That is one caveat with a good urban fantasy series. There is no like end of story in book one and then you get a different story in book two. No, you got to read the whole series to know what happens.
Yeah.
So I think binging is probably the best way to go about it, and that's why I'm bringing complete.
Yeah, and it might be broken down to 3 arcs, like your character arcs are happening. So it might just be like a 3, 6, 9 book series, and then there's like a new character arc that's happening, or there's a new thing that's happening. So so sometimes the series get extended, but there's the character arc that your completed series is like the arc, the resolution is satisfied, at this point of this level of this book.
Yeah, but they're definitely easier to get into it because like with regular high fantasy or even like when we're talking romance, there's other things that you're talking about. Like in a fantasy world, you're learning what are all the what's making that world. There's a lot of rules that you have to learn and understand. And with urban fantasy, it's more like you get in and you're up and running. Not all of them. Sometimes some of them are kind of slow building in, but for the most part I think that it's quite easy. And also when it comes to the romance, some urban fantasies have romance and some don't. For the most part, the one that I'm going to talk about today have an element of romance, but I also feel like a lot of times these books get marketed as romance, like kind of like a paranormal romance, and they are not. So if you're a romance reader and you pick up a urban fantasy with a romantic subplot, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed because your expectation is that you're going to get a lot of the tension between the characters. And sometimes in a whole book, it's just like a little bit, maybe it's just a touch, maybe it's just a small interaction, and you have to wait 3 books for something to even happen. So prepare your expectations when it comes to the romance. But yes, all of the ones that I'm going to talk about today have romance. It's just a sprinkle.
Awesome. All right, let's get to the recommendations. Let's hit it.
Let's hit it. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the one that's most romance leaning. And it's one that I consider kind of like blends the 2 genres between urban fantasy and paranormal romance. And it is the Night Huntress series, so by Jeaniene Frost. So this one has basically vampires. That's the main thing. There are other supernatural creatures, but they come in more as like the bad guys or the things of, let's call them cases, because it does have a very military operation feel throughout the series. Maybe not so much in the first book, but as you're going through the series, it is kind of like these military type things that they're going through, and then they're investigating. So that's the best like vibe that I can give you. But basically our heroine is a half breed, and she just knows that she's a half breed because her father, or the sperm donor, raped her mother. And she's made it her mission that she's going to go and kill all the vampires. So she becomes a vampire hunter. And, she's not trained by anybody. She's just self taught, and she just goes out every night and tries to kill vampires until she meets the main hero of the story, who's this very old vampire. And he kind of takes a liking to her, of course, but he also decides that he's going to teach her things. And then she's introduced to the, larger world of paranormal creatures and all of this stuff. Now, our main hero, he also kind of hunts vampires, even though he is a vampire himself, but he is actually doing it to get rid of the riffraff, the people, the vampires that are ruin it for the rest of the race, and they're doing things because there's a lot of vampire politics, so they're doing things that you're not supposed to be doing. He's not necessarily an enforcer for the race, but that is kind of what he's doing. So, and then again, there's the aspect that becomes more government, is that then there's this organization that gets formed, and there is a team, and they go out and they hunt and whatever, and they're like looking for the bad guys, and sometimes is ghosts and zombies, and Marie Laveau is in one of them. So there's a lot to it. So it's quite overarching in plot. And this series is also really good because you do have the main romance of, like you said, character arcs. So you do have the main romance of these two main characters throughout a lot of the books, but there are kind of tangents to it. So there are some characters that is just one book, and it's more of a paranormal romance, where you get the main story for that one vampire, and it's a one book, and you get their whole thing. And that happens for two of the vampires. And then another vampire has I think it's a 4-book or a 3-book series. So they're all part of the universe, but you do get to see those other little stories. But you kind of do need to read them in the order of the whole series, because there are things going on in the background that are just going to make it easier to digest. But it's the one that I would say has a ton of action, because that is one thing that I always really love about urban fantasy, is a lot of action, and probably very little of like trying to understand the world. It's quite easy to get into all the rules. And then also it does have plenty of romance. It does have sex in them, because sometimes they have romance, but there is no like on-page sex. So this one does. It might get a little bit to get there, but it's coming. So yeah, it's one that I always recommend for sure.
Yeah, this one's perfect for Buffy, Buffy fans. Like, it's just
For
a
sure.
Vampire Slayer essentially in book form, and it has a sexy vampire who's mentoring her.
Yes. I mean, that old vampire. And I know there's a lot of conversation right now about like, oh, well, that's like grooming because he's older than her. I mean, that's all paranormals.
Yeah,
They're
it's all
all
paranormal.
ancient. I think one of the vampires that has a side story, I think he's like Egyptian, like old, like yeah, they are very old. Like
Yeah,
there's no
it
way
is
around
okay.
it.
She's of age. She's not 15, so
Yes.
she's not in
But
high
of course,
school.
the
She's
age difference between them is very vast. But yeah,
yes, but
they're lots of fun. If you want like action packed, I definitely always recommend that series for sure.
awesome. What's the next series you want to
So
recommend?
the next one, I'm gonna go with something fun, like light, not lighthearted, but it is something that's going to make you laugh. And it's Dorinda Jones, the Charlie Davidson series. So this one it does also have quite a bit of action. And what I love about it, she is the Grim Reaper, basically. And she has to help souls and whatever. And there's always some chaos that happens. And I'm not going to spoil who the hero is in the series, but he is something. He's not human, and there is a reason why he's always around her and he's always involved. And there is a big reveal about what he is, so I'm not going to say it. So he is involved always in all her cases. It's kind of like if you've read Cozy Mysteries, or like Stephanie Plum's Janet Ivanovich Stephanie
Yeah,
Plum series. That is that, but in paranormal form.
perfect.
Basically, there's always some like lots of shenanigans happening, car explosions, like she's always getting in some mess. Her uncle, I think, is a police officer, so sometimes she also helps with like her paranormal expertise to help solve these cases. So it is a little bit of a mystery, sometimes sleuthing, but there is some kind of big thing that's always happening in the paranormal world that she has to help with, and then of course they're after her. And the hero is there to protect her sometimes, or sometimes maybe not. Sometimes maybe he's the one causing trouble. But what I love about it is the humor. She has her little sidekick that is always adding some lighthearted humor to the stuff. And of course, there is also romance. So this one is also, I would say, a little bit romance heavy. There is sex on the page, and I probably will say that you do have to wait a little bit. So these are not series where they're going to be like getting together in book one, but it's worth it.
Yes.
There's a good payoff.
Sometimes it's nice not to get ready in book one, because then it gets boring in the end,
Yeah.
like later on series. These are long series. These are not series of like 1 or 2 books. These are long series that you gotta work for the payoff. And so it is okay just to wait. Like it's just part of the process. It's a slow burn.
Exactly. And what's good with this one is because it does have that mystery element, you are solving a case in each one. So you do get that satisfaction of closing that chapter, but you have the overarching plot of what's going on in the background. So you do need to read them in order for that reason, but you can at least be satisfied that you're starting a case and you're finishing the case for the most part in one book.
Perfect.
So those are easy. Okay, so the next series that I'm going to bring to someone's attention, because I feel like nobody really talks about it, and it's a series that I started off hating. It's the Shifter series by Rachel Vincent. So this book is, I think the series is 6 books, if I'm not mistaken. It's 5 or 6 books. And the main character is a tabby in a, I think it's leopards, but there's some kind of cat shifter pack. And she's young, she's going off to college, and she does have that personality. She's young and she wants to be free, and she doesn't want all the rules of being in the society and all the rules of the society of her pack. So she goes off to college, she wants to go alone, and females are not a normal easy thing, so of course they're very protected. And she just decides that she's going to go off to college. She doesn't want anybody protecting her. So in the first book especially, I had so many problems with her because I really did not like that kind of personality. But you got to stick with the series because it is so, so good. And she has so much character growth because we see her go from having this mentality to being exposed to so much that happens in this world. And I think the actual timeline of the series is maybe 1 year. So there's 6 books and everything happens in 1 year, and a lot happens. There's a lot of politics and one pack and the other pack and the rogues and all of that. So there's a lot that happens. There's a lot that she goes through. There is a love triangle that will just kill you. And so you do get to really care for all of these characters. And what I really loved is seeing that character growth, because again, she starts off as this very immature woman, and by the end she's basically the leader of the pack, and she's just grown so much. So it's a great journey to go on. Just know that you're going to have to like deal with that first book. You're going to digest it a little bit, but it is so, so good after that.
I am adding this one because I have never heard of this series, and I'm like, oh, this
nobody talks about it.
This might be worthwhile. So I'm like,
and actually she's done a spin-off series, which is more of paranormal romance.
Yeah.
And the spin-off series that she did is, I think it's paranormal romance, but like new adult. Okay. So, it does focus on, I'm not going to spoil it because it has to do with part of the love triangle situation, but kind of like it goes into that direction. So there's more to be had there. So even if you wanted to just read one of those in the spinoff to kind of get a resolution after you finish the Shifter series, it'll be satisfying. But if you're into like paranormal politics and all of that kind of stuff, this one is like full of it.
You know, I love my Chloe Neal series. Like, I don't know about
Yes,
paranormal politics. Give me like all
yes,
the
yes.
intrigue and stuff. It's like a
Yeah, and
little
I
bit
mean,
of
if you like the Chloe Neal with the heroine in that one,
yeah.
she's a little bit like that. Maybe a little bit more at the beginning, like maybe a little bit more, but definitely she's very much like married.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay,
Awesome.
so let's
I love
see. Do
this
you want to do
recommendation.
one more? I have one more
Yeah.
series.
Yeah. Let's
Okay,
do one
so
more.
this one I'm going to give you is one that you can actually like watch a TV show as well, and it's the Women of the Underworld, the Other World series by Kelly Armstrong. So this is one where it does have a main character arc of a main couple. They are shifters. And then as you go through the series, it kind of shifts. So it shifts the points of view. So I think books 4 and 5 are witches, so it does have a different HEA, and you kind of start to get the resolution of the romance part of it as you're going through. So, like in book 1, you may not get that couple's HEA, but maybe by book 3, that HEA is kind of resolved. And then it goes into another set of couples, and so on and so forth. And it does rotate. There's necromancers, there's demons, there's witches, there's all kinds of stuff. And I think it rotates through like maybe 5 or 6 different couples and points of view throughout the series. However, there is that overarching plot line of what's going on in the world, and they're all interconnected. So it's really fun, and there is a sci-fi channel series that was made from this series. It's called Bitten. So if you wanted to watch that, I don't know how many seasons they did, but I actually did watch it, and it was pretty true to the for the most part, pretty true to the books, and it was fun. So do recommend
Yeah.
that also.
Oh my gosh, I love it. You got like a TV
There
show
you
to
go.
watch, you know, like notifications.
Yes.
So awesome. Francesca, tell us about the Under the Covers community blog and
Okay,
YouTube
so
channel.
on YouTube, we actually are doing our podcast episodes on YouTube now. So we're doing one every single day. We're bringing recommendations. We're talking tropes. We're talking genres. So a little bit of discussion. So some of it, what you would consider kind of like educational content in terms of romance, like what's the difference between one type of fantasy versus another one, and that kind of stuff. But also lots of recommendations. So that's going to be happening on YouTube every single day, Monday through Friday. And of course, we have our live show every Thursday, which, you know, we have lots of fun and lots of recommendations. And then you can always come over to Substack, where we have our community. We do have some exclusive content for paid members there. We have free book lists every single week, so like additional recommendations. And also, for free subscribers to Substack is the best way for you to stay up to date with everything that we're posting across everywhere. And also for paid subscribers, we have our book vault, which is like a book release calendar, basically, but also we categorize older backlist titles by different tropes, character types, settings. So it's kind of a resource to help find something that you're in the mood for.
Yes,
Lots of
lots
stuff.
of good recommendations here. Yeah. So thank you, Francesca, for
Thank you
being
so
on the
much for
show.
having me.
Awesome. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider rate, review, subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment and let us know some of your favorite urban fantasy recommendations. So thank you so much for listening. Bye.